there's a figure in Islamic history who he completely breaks the model.
He really does.
You have a man who fought the Prophet's family, who set up the first hereditary monarchy, and who is, well, he's accused of ordering the cursing of the fourth caliph.
And yet,
at the exact same time, a huge part of the Muslim world relies on him for, instructions on how to pray.
it's the ultimate test case, isn't it? The intersection of history, politics, and theology. Usually a figure this controversial politically, you'd expect them to be written out of the religious tradition entirely.
Exiled from it.
Yeah.
But with Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, he's right there in the canonical books.
Yeah.
So today, our mission is to grapple with this paradox. Can you actually separate the politician from the religious transmitter?
It's so tough. I mean, his resume is complicated, to put it mildly.
Complicated is a good word for it. You have to remember he's the son of Abu Sufyan.
The archenemy of the Prophet for years and years. So Muawiyah himself is one of the Tulaka, the late converts.
He only comes into the fold at the conquest of Mecca in 630, which gives him a really short window with the Prophet. Maybe 2 years?
Roughly 2 years, yeah. Compare that to someone like Ali or Abu Bakr who had decades.
Right.
But in that short period, he served as a scribe. And that specific title, Scribe of Revelation, that's where the battle lines are drawn almost immediately.
I was looking into this, and that title, it feels like it's doing a lot of heavy lifting. It's like a theological shield.
He does.
If you claim he wrote down the Quran as it was revealed, then attacking his character, well, you're almost attacking the integrity of the Quran itself.
That's precisely the Sunni argument. If the Prophet trusted him with the word of God, he must be trustworthy in character. But the historical reality is a lot murkier.
So the skeptics and Shia scholars, they would say this title is a later invention.
A later inflation, a hagiographic add-on. They argue he was a scribe for, mundane things.
Like letters,
Yeah.
not the Quran.
Exactly. Letters, treaties, land grants. The theory is that later, during the Umayyad dynasty, his supporters needed to protect their founder. If he's just a guy who wrote letters, he's expendable.
But if he wrote the Quran,
He's untouchable.
okay, but let's look at what he actually transmitted. Because if this was all some big political project to legitimize his rule, I'd expect his narrations to be full of propaganda.
You'd think so, right? The Prophet said, listen to the guy from Banu Umayyah.
Something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at the 163 hadiths attributed to him, that's not what you find at all.
No, it isn't. And that's one of the most surprising things when you look at the data. Academic studies show maybe, 1 to 5% of his narrations have any explicit political content.
So the vast majority are just mundane.
Incredibly mundane. We're talking about rules for purification, prayer timings, general ethics.
Like beads are like vessels. Things like that.
Right. Or rules about trading gold and silver.
Yeah.
It creates this strange dissonance. You have this Machiavellian political operator on one hand and a narrator concerned with the details of ritual law on the other.
Which, you could argue, strengthens the defense for him, couldn't you? If he was just fabricating hadith to stay in power, he did a terrible job of it.
Why narrate about hygiene when you could narrate about the divine right of kings?
Exactly.
Unless, of course, the mundanity is the point. By weaving himself into the fabric of everyday Islam, he makes himself indispensable. You can't remove him without leaving a hole in the law.
That brings us right to the core theological conflict here. The Sunni doctrine of Adala al-Sahaba, the collective integrity of all the companions.
Which basically creates a firewall, doesn't it? It separates political sin from religious integrity.
So the logic is that narrative truthfulness and political action are two completely separate spheres.
Yes. A companion can make a massive political error, even a catastrophic one like a civil war, without automatically becoming a liar when it comes to the Prophet's words.
And this is where the term intihad comes in. This idea that his wars were an interpretive error, not a malicious rebellion.
Correct. The standard Sunni position is that Muawiyah exercised ijtihad. He thought he was seeking justice for Uthman's murder. He was wrong, Bali was in the right. But because he was a companion using his judgment, he still gets some reward for the effort, even if the action was a sin.
So his hadith narrations remain valid.
And you have someone like Muhammad ibn Sirin, a major early scholar, who just says it bluntly, Muawiyah was not a suspect of fabricating hadith.
But for the Shia perspective, and frankly for a lot of critical historians, that separation is impossible. You can't slice a person in half like that.
Character is holistic.
Right. If a man is willing to draw a sword against the rightful imam, causing thousands of deaths, Are we really supposed to believe he's scrupulous about quoting the Prophet accurately?
That's the counter-argument. If you are a boggy rebel against legitimate authority, your integrity is fundamentally compromised. For the Shia, Adala isn't just about not telling a lie, it's about your whole spiritual orientation.
If you oppose the Prophet's family, you've severed your connection to the truth.
You cannot be a source of law if you are an agent of chaos.
And this isn't just a theoretical debate. We have to look at the flashpoints, at where this theory hits the battlefield. The Battle of Siffin is a trauma, and the death of Ammar ibn Yasir, that feels like the smoking gun.
The Hadith of Ammar is probably the single most difficult text for Muawiyah's defenders to handle. The Prophet explicitly told Ammar, the rebellious group Al-Fia al-Baghiyah will kill you.
A clear prophecy. And at Siffin, Ammar is fighting for Ali, and he's killed by Muawiyah's army.
It's a closed loop. If the Prophet says the rebellious group will kill Ammar, and Muawiyah's group kills Ammar, then
Muawiyah is the leader of the rebellion. It seems to brand him, theologically, as the aggressor.
It does.
So how does the tradition absorb that? You can't just pretend the battle didn't happen.
They don't. They accept the Hadith. They accept that Muawiyah's group was the rebellious one in that specific instance. But again, they fall back on ijtihad.
They argue that being a rebel in a political sense doesn't make you a disbeliever or a liar. It just makes you wrong.
Politically wrong, yes. But that feels like a distinction without a difference to the people who died in that war.
And there was that attempt to spin it, wasn't there? That claim that Ali killed Ammar because he brought him to the battle in the first place.
Which Ali just dismantled immediately. He shot back. Did the Prophet then kill his uncle Hamza because he brought him to Uhud? It just shows you the desperation of the apologetics.
But that mistake defense gets even harder to maintain when you look at his actions off the battlefield. The cursing, the allegation that he instituted a state policy of abusing Ali from the pulpit.
This is the darkest cloud over his legacy. You have the report in Sahih Muslim where Muawiyah asks Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, what prevents you from abusing Abu Turab? Abu Turab, of course, being Ali's nickname.
And the word there is abusing. It's not criticizing.
Yeah. No, it's insults, Sa'd. And Sa'd refuses, and he lists these incredible virtues of Ali he heard directly from the Prophet. Now, defenders will read this and say, see, it was just an inquiry. Muawiyah was just asking why Sa'd wasn't doing it.
That seems like an incredibly generous reading.
It is.
The whole context implies that abusing Ali was the default, the expectation. Sa'd was the outlier who had to explain himself.
Exactly. Even if it wasn't a direct order in that specific chat, the text reveals an atmosphere where cursing the Prophet's family was normalized, and as the head of state, the book stops with him.
So this leads directly to the question of propaganda. The Umayyads won. They wrote the history for the next century. A secular historian would just assume they invented hadiths to legitimize their rule.
Of course, obedience to rulers, the merits of Syria, it all looks very convenient. History is written by the victors.
It looks like state-sponsored fabrication.
It does. But here is where we find a really fascinating twist in the scholarship.
Yeah.
You would expect the Sunni tradition, which accepts Muawiyah, to be just flooded with hadiths praising him.
Saying he's the light of the Ummah or something.
Hundreds of them. But we don't find that. In fact, we find the exact opposite. Ishaq ibn Rahawayh, who was the teacher of Imam Bukhari, made this stunning admission. He said, there is not any sahih, any authentic hadith from the Prophet about the merits of Muawiyah.
Wait, let's pause on that.
Yeah.
A foundational Sunni scholar is admitting there is zero authentic praise for him from the Prophet.
Zero. The great scholars, they knew the difference between the man and the myth. They drew a line. They accepted his narrations on law, but they rejected the propaganda about his virtues.
They effectively said, we'll take his reports on prayer, but we won't pretend the Prophet thought he was a saint.
And that distinction, it seems, came at a very high cost. You have to tell the story of al-Nasai.
This is the moment that really drives home the tension between political power and scholarly integrity.
It's a tragic story. Al-Nasai, the author of one of the 6 canonical hadith books, a giant of the tradition, travels to Damascus late in his life. Damascus was the heart of Umayyad support. They loved Muawiyah there.
And they wanted al-Nasai to validate that love.
They demanded it. They asked him to write a book on the virtues of Muawiyah. They wanted the stamp of religious authority on their political hero.
And he refused.
He didn't just refuse, he was brutally honest about it. He apparently asked them, what virtues should I write? That the Prophet said, may Allah not fill his belly.
Wow. He threw a criticism back in their faces.
He did. And the mob beat him. They beat him so severely he had to be carried out of the mosque, and he died from his injuries a short time later.
He was beaten to death for refusing to invent propaganda.
Yes. But think about what that means for the tradition. The scholars were under life-threatening pressure to canonize Muawiyah. And the top-tier scholars, they refused. They held the line. They preserved the silence about his virtues, even while preserving his legal narrations.
It proved the system had teeth. The isnad, the chain of transmission, it wasn't just a rubber stamp for the ruling dynasty.
It filtered out the most obvious fake praise, yes. But it couldn't filter out the politics entirely. The fact that we're even having this debate is because the Umayyads won and the Alids lost.
So where does this leave the average person trying to make sense of this? We have the Sunni, flawed but valid companion, the Shia, treacherous usurper. Are there other views? What about the Ibadis?
The Ibadis are that forgotten third branch. They grew out of the groups that rejected both Ali and Muawiyah.
A plague on both your houses.
Essentially, they reject Muawiyah entirely as a tyrant, but they don't deify Ali either. For them, political corruption voids religious authority. Full stop.
And the modern academic or secular historian, they look at this Sunni, double-bind-loving Ali but having to trust Muawiyah, and it just looks like a psychological fracture.
It created a state of tawaqquf, silence. The theological solution has basically been to stop talking about the details of the conflict to preserve unity.
You accept the content, the prayers and fasting, regardless of the character of the transmitter.
Yes.
But that silence is loud.
It's deafening. It requires you to hold two opposing ideas in your head at the same time. That Ali was the rightly guided imam, and the man who fought him is a trustworthy guide to the Prophet's practice.
Which brings us back to the original question. The vessel. Can a flawed vessel carry pure water?
That's the question. The Sunni tradition gambled on yes. They bet that the community could filter out the political poison and keep the religious cure.
And the Shia.
The Shia tradition argues that the vessel itself contaminates the water. You cannot learn the religion of justice from a man they see as fundamentally unjust.
And the historian just sits back and asks, who owns the well?
Exactly. History isn't just what happened, it's about who survived to tell the story. And Muawiyah survived, and because he survived, his voice is in the canon.
That's a thought that lingers, doesn't it? We think of these truths as immutable things, but when you peel back the layers, you see the cracks, the compromises, the scars of these old wars.
And realizing that doesn't have to break the tradition, but it definitely complicates it. It forces you to engage with the text not as a simple list of rules, but as a living record of a community struggling to survive its own fractures.
Muawiyah isn't just a narrator then. He's a mirror for how we deal with the collision of power and truth. We'll have to leave it there. Thank you for walking us through this minefield.
It was a pleasure.
And to you listening, don't just stop at the surface. The history is always deeper than the headline. We'll see you in the next deep dive.